Appamada's programs and facilities are supported through your generosity. Your support really does make a huge difference. You'll find a link for contributions on the website at appamada.org/contribute. Thank you so much.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, whatever we have, wherever the sun is, where you are. So thank you all for coming. This is very nice. It's been a long time since I've done this. And I've got to say, it's hard for me to do Dharma talks because it's hard for me to get them together. I don't have a lot of stage fright in this instance, but it's hard for me to organize myself, organize my thoughts into anything comprehensible. So because that being said, I'm going to do a lot of reading from other people, but it's kind of a mishmash of different things. Again, I didn't get myself into complete comprehension, complete organization, but I know you'll all understand and be able to get what you can, get what's encouraging, and just let the rest go by. So I wanted to name this talk this morning. This came to me early this morning when I was lying in bed. I wanted to name this talk, What to Do When There's Nothing to Be Done. So, like I said, I have various things to read, but I wanted to start with a story, a very short little Zen story, and a poem. So the story is, a monk asked Bao Shu, when the 10,000 things come at you all at once, what can you do? Bao Shu responded, don't try to control them. So the 10,000 things in Zen comes from Taoism, where the saying goes, Tao produced the one produced the two produced the three, and the three produced the 10,000 things. So myriad things, all the phenomenal world. So what do you do when the 10,000 things come all at once? Don't try to control them. They will come, they will go. We can't control them, so don't try. Can everybody hear me? Mm-hmm. Okay. I work with a lot of people that have a hard time hearing, and so I tend to be really loud. So the poem, in my mind, related to this, though you may have to stretch that. No, I don't think so. This is by W.S. Merwin, and it's from a book of his collected poems called Migrations. And the poem is Place. And I have to think about that for a moment in the light of the rest of the poem. Place. On the last day of the world, I would want to plant a tree. What for? Not for the fruit. The tree that bears the fruit is not the one that was planted. Is that because the tree is so different than it was when it was planted, than when it bears the fruit? Or is it the way I think about the tree. I'm not thinking about it bearing fruit. On the last day of the world, I would want to plant a tree. What for? Not for the fruit. The tree that bears the fruit is not the one that was planted. I want the tree that stands in the earth for the first time, with the sun already going down and the water touching its roots. In the earth full of the dead and the clouds passing one by one over its leaves. So this poem came to me when I was thinking about, what do you do when there's nothing left to do? How do we proceed when we don't know how to proceed, when we've given up hope? What do we do? And maybe that's something we can discuss later in the Dharma Talk. What does each one of us do? Because I think we all have wisdom about what we do that is helpful to be shared. W.S. Merwin would want to plant a tree. To me, that speaks to not wanting to be hopeless in the place of no hope, not wanting to do nothing, not wanting to be nihilistic, but to keep on knowing that the sun is already going down, and that to be aware of the life of the tree, to be aware of what is happening right now. The water is touching the roots. The clouds are passing over the leaves. It's living in the earth, which is full of the dead. We go on when there's nothing left to do. We go on and we pay close attention to what is. That's some of what this poem speaks to me, and I wanted to read from Joko Beck, from her book, Ordinary Wonder, which was the most recent published book, a posthumous published book of hers. And I wanted to talk about something that somebody brought to me in practice discussion about practice. We have this practice, and we are at a point where perhaps we feel, or at some point or another, all of us have and will have a point where we don't know what to do. We feel that everything has been done and we don't have another idea. So this section is called What is Practice? Because how does practice help us in that situation? We want something that allows us to live the life we imagine, allows us to live the life we aspire to. And what do we do? What is our practice when there's nothing left to do. And this has a beginning. What is practice? She quotes Zen Master Renzai. If you love the sacred and despise the ordinary, you are still bobbing in the ocean of delusion. Sometimes people say Zen practice doesn't work. Well, of course it doesn't work. Typical Jokobek. The only thing that works is us. Our practice is ourself. Practice is about awareness, and awareness is just our own selves. It's not something, some formula that you can learn from a book and then do it. It's not a form of calisthenics. Practice is the act of placing our awareness on what is occurring in the moment as best we can. It is the act of attention to this moment. It is the act of being honest as we can, in noticing what is really going on with us in the moment, noticing that we may not like what's going on, and noticing our thoughts and impulses about what we would prefer to be going on. Finally, practice is experiencing what all of this is in our body, in our being, and resting in that. Practice is doing this over and over, thousands and thousands of times, until it just wears out. We are the joy, the love, the compassion of this moment, regardless of what it may look like on the outside. Practice is that which enables us to live a life that makes some sense and is harmonious. I don't mean it's some sugary sweet. It's not. But it promotes the welfare of ourselves and other people. When we practice, we pay attention. The more we practice, the greater our understanding is, not just of ourselves, but of how life works and how things more or less go. When we have that, we tend to have a life that's more satisfactory. It feels better to us. We like basically to make sense. The act of sitting is part of the practice. It might seem very boring, very ordinary, but the ordinary is just a manifestation of the sacred. They're not different. They're absolutely the same thing. Whether you're working on your car engine, going for a walk with a friend, or taking a piano lesson, each of these things done with awareness is both ordinary and sacred. When you can feel this duality of the everyday and the sacred without twisting your mind around it, you'll begin to feel a joy that embraces both happiness and unhappiness. Our lives seem to consist of a string of moments. I get up in the morning, and the moments just tick off as I go through the day. And usually we greet each moment, if we're honest about it, with a little twist of reaction in our mind. And the reaction is, I like this, but I don't like that. Or I'm neutral about it. It's the same with people who cross our path. I like them, or I don't like them, or I haven't thought about it. Particularly, this is how we respond to the tasks that confront us during the day. I don't want to do that. It doesn't suit me. Or, it's okay with me. I'm glad to do that. We live as if we have a little judge that's sitting inside of us, wagging a finger at everything. Now, we're not really living our life. We're just trying to get it all fixed so it suits the judge. We can't enjoy our experience or other people because the judgment and the emotion, this concoction in our head, runs our life. Our practice enables us to take the ordinary moments of our life, one after the other, and experience them without judging, trying to fix, hold tightly, or run away. I suppose I'm a quiet person and I meet somebody who is noisy and boisterous. My first thought may be, I don't like her. The judgment has already pushed me into withdrawing. The only thing we know is the fact that we are reacting. Often, we don't even notice we are reacting. We just react, and react. It occurs 1,000 times a day, almost constantly. For most of us, the only time we become aware of our reactions at all is when they get stronger, when we get strongly criticized for somebody, or we fail in a test, or we look forward to going somewhere and find that we can't go because we're ill. These are the times when we become aware of our constant judging and have a good chance to take a look at it. If you're sitting in meditation every day, you have an opportunity to see how your mind works. As you continue your practice, you begin to see those thoughts in a more dispassionate form, which means you label them. It's painful and sometimes kind of dull to do that. But something begins to be learned. For example, I hardly ever meet anyone without forming a judgment. But having this awareness when I meet someone, I'm much more aware of my tendency to do that. Awareness makes a difference after a while, and you can begin to soften up just a bit as a person. You're not so quick to put a label or judgment on just anybody. That's effective practice. Effective practice has two parts. The first is daily sitting. Until you've been sitting, I'd say 25 or 30 years or more, you can't skip it. We all need it. That's the discipline that really helps us get more skilled at paying attention. The second part of effective practice is our ability to pay attention to life as we're living it, when we're not sitting. This might be very weak at first, but as we practice, we become more aware of our life as opposed to getting caught in it. Maybe once an hour we'll notice that we're caught. In truth, we get caught more often than that, but we tend not to see the little things. We begin to see that if somebody hurts our feelings, for instance, it might be 2 days before that hurt really settles out, depending on how much we're hurt. It might take months for some people. For people who like feuds, it can take 20 years, 100 perhaps 300 years. Look at these countries that have stayed at war for centuries. The fixed notion that the other guys are all wrong and I'm right is so strong by now that they don't even question it. When you sit, you can feel that true awareness is in the body. In the Bible, it is written, "The kingdom of God lies within thee." I don't think that means enlightenment is sitting in a little place in there. I think it means awakening is within you, available to every cell of your body. When we sit, we learn where we hold our emotions in our body and where we are sensitive. This isn't something you can outthink. You can have 6 PhDs, it doesn't help. Maybe it makes it worse. You will gain more from your sitting if you keep it simple. There's a place for philosophy in books, but before you dive into a book for the answer, which it won't be there, you have to dive into yourself. Traditional Western thought often proceeds as if the body has no intelligence, but the body stores a lot of knowledge. When you feel threatened, for example, the body reacts long before the message reaches the brain. The reaction takes place before it reaches the brain. Our thinking is not the most important thing for our survival. The most important thing is the innate intelligence that lives in the body. Practice is returning always back to the body, feeling the original pain, anger, or whatever emotion it is that you're trying to cover. Human beings want to cover everything so we don't feel it. We don't want to go out of our way to feel something that's unpleasant, do we? No. If you're like me, you'll find some way to cover it. But the longer we practice, the more quickly we see what we're doing. Life takes us to a certain point where living with our actual experiences covered over becomes unsatisfactory. Say you get a new car. The minute you get a new car, you have to worry about it. Someone's drawing too close to me in the parking lot. They're getting too close. The least little scratch becomes a disaster. Everything about that new car becomes a worry, including the bigger insurance. We start to see that there is no outside thing that will satisfy us. There is no object, no relationship, no amount of money that will make everything better. At this point, practice can begin. Things don't suddenly get fixed when we sit and pay attention. Practice limps along most of the time. It's confusing. It's messy. It's discouraging. Any good practice is all these things, at least some of the time, because practice is basically a struggle to understand the nature of our experience. It can feel like a violent struggle. It's by no means an easy, peaceful trip. And the main thing that happens from effective practice, sounds even worse, is that you just get more and more disappointed with all the things you thought were going to make you happy. These things are fine, but our attachment to them loosens, and our need for them begins to weaken. The more we practice, the less we turn away, and the more our actual experience of life gets stronger. We begin to know who we are. To know who you are doesn't mean something magical. It just means that over time, as things come up, you know how you are, mind and body with that. And then you can move on to the next thing. There's no perfection anywhere, but there is more spaciousness. There is more peace. There is more being awake and experiencing your life. These are the fruits of effective practice. So I thought that that was a good answer for me, and hopefully for you all, about what does practice offer us when there's nothing left to be done? That we can't expect for it to get perfect. We can continue paying attention and bringing our attention back to our experience. Because we have an aspiration to be awake, to be aware, and to truly experience our life, our short life. I also wanted to read a section from Living by Vow by Shohaku Okamura. This is a book that I'm studying with a group of people, and we read a section yesterday that was very moving to me that is called Vow as Sangha. And again, this is kind of chock-a-block as far as continuous subjects go, but I thought it related to the most recent intensive community, but also to what do we do when there's nothing left to do? What do we take refuge in? And more than take refuge in, what is the action we take? And what role does Sangha play in that? So he says, vow as Sangha. And this relates to the refuges, of course. I take refuge in Buddha. I take refuge in Dharma. I take refuge in Sangha. What does that mean? Sangha, or community, is an important manifestation of the concept of vow. We see this in the life of Guishan Lingyu, a famous Chinese Zen master who established a large and influential Sangha in China. How he accomplished this is instructive. Guishan was instrumental in the establishment of Zen monasteries. Before his time, there was no formal Zen Buddhist orders. People simply came together to practice, but then Zen monks started to create their own unique form of monastic practice. In the beginning of Zen, it was the beginning of Zen as a distinct school of Chinese Buddhism. This is at least the traditional view of the history of Chinese Zen. Guishan was a tenzo, the chief cook in the monastery where he practiced with his teacher, Baizhang Huihai. One day, Guishan was standing near the abbot's room where Baizhang was staying. Baizhang asked Guishan, "Who is it?" Guishan replied, "It is me, Ling Yu," Guishan's Dharma name. Baizhang said, "Would you dig in the fire pot and see if there is fire or not?" It was winter, and the fire pot was their source of heat. Guishan stirred the fire pot and said, "No fire." Then Baizhang got up and came over, dug deep in the ashes and found a tiny ember. He showed it to Ling Yu and said, "What is this? Isn't this fire?" Guishan was enlightened. The fire in this story refers to Buddha nature. Buddha nature is not something solid or immovable, but rather an energy that motivates us to practice. And not just Zazen or Buddhist practice. Buddha nature is the fire of the life force that enables us to aspire to be better persons, to be more helpful to others, to settle into a healthy way of life, and to practice the way. It's difficult to find the fire of Buddha nature inside ourselves, but we must. It's there. We are alive, so we have this force that drives us to practice and wake up to the reality of life. It may be only an ember, but all of us, without exception, have it. When we practice with other people, we gather together small fires. If we try to build a fire in a hibachi or fire pot with a single piece of charcoal, it soon dies out. But even one tiny ember, if we feed it with charcoal, becomes a big fire. This is the meaning of Sangha. We practice together with other people in a Sangha. Each of us has a small fire, which alone will die out sooner or later. Together we become bigger than ourselves. This was Guishan Lengyu's enlightenment. Baizhang sent Guishan to Mount Wi, an isolated, precipitous, and awe-inspiring mountain suitable for a great monastery. He practiced there alone for several years. Dogen Zenji comments on Guishang's practice, which he greatly admired, in a chapter of Shobo Genzo titled Gyoji. Gyoji means continuous or ceaseless practice. Here, Dogen talks about many Chinese Zen masters and their practice, Guishan being one of them. For Dogen, Guishan's practice offered an important example of how to establish a monastery or Sangha. And I think for our purposes, this refers to a Sangha, how to establish and maintain a Sangha. After the bestowal of prophecy, Dharma transmission, Zen master Dayen of Mount Wi, this was Guishan Lingyu, went directly to the steep Guishan mountain. There he made friends with bears and animals, lived in a thatched hermitage, and kept practicing. He didn't avoid hardships with wind and snow. He ate only chestnuts or horse chestnuts. There were neither temple buildings nor temple provisions. However, he ceaselessly devoted himself to continuous practice for more than 40 years. Later, his temple became well known throughout the country, and many excellent practitioners gathered there. Okamura continues. People came to practice with him, and eventually his Sangha grew huge. It is said that he had 1,500 students and 41 Dharma successors. Even though in the beginning he practiced alone, his practice was not for himself. He vowed to create a monastery or Sangha to practice with others. Dogen Zenji discusses the inner attitude we should maintain when we vow to create, or I would say maintain, a Sangha or practice place. He continues, when we make a vow to found a temple or Sangha, we should not be motivated by human sentiment, but we should strengthen our aspiration for continuous practice of Buddha Dharma. Our vow then should not be based on the human tendency to undertake things that we see as good, useful, or beneficial for ourselves alone. Things we expect to bring us fame, profit, or self-satisfaction. This human sentiment isn't necessarily bad, but when we practice Buddha Dharma with others, it is a hindrance. If each person seeks his or her own happiness and holds his or her own views, opinions, values, and ways of thinking, then there will be conflict. If we practice with other people on the basis of human sentiment, it may work for a while, but eventually it will fail. So our practice should be based not on human sentiment, but on an aspiration for the continuous practice of Buddha Dharma. Dogen Zenji continues, even if we don't have lofty temple buildings, if we practice, the place can be called a dojo of ancient Buddhas. Dojo means a place for practice. Now, we use the word dojo for martial arts like karate or aikido, but originally this term referred to the place where the Buddha was enlightened under the Bodhi tree. Dojo is both a place for practice and a place for enlightenment, because practice and enlightenment are one. We hear that ancient people practiced on the ground or under a tree. Such places are sacred forever. A single person's continuous practice creates a dojo for many Buddhas. This is the basic point of Dogen Zenji's practice. We don't need lofty temple buildings for our practice. We don't need a formal zazen hall. When we vow to establish a dojo, monastery, or sangha, we should not forget this. The number of buildings or people is not essential. The critical points are practice and aspiration. So I'm not exactly sure how those things fit together, but they do fit together in my mind. That Sangha is one of the ways we move forward when there's no way to move forward, when we can't see what there is to do. But I did want to open this up to just conversation, because I would really love to hear what people do in their own lives, in their own practice, when they feel like they don't know the next thing to do. What do you do? I know Peg recently was speaking to a group I was with, and she was speaking about this topic and saying, I'm just concentrating on very mundane things. I'm washing the clothes, I'm drying the clothes, I'm folding the clothes, I'm putting the clothes away. But I'm interested what other people have found in their own lives that is what they go to keep them going when they feel like they don't have any answers and maybe the rug has been pulled out from under them. Rosemarie.
Hi, thank you, Anne. What a rich talk and a wonderful set of questions. I write, that's one thing. Very recently, I began to open myself to calling a friend and friend or spiritual friend, that I feel really safe with. And I read the first part of your talk. I just remembered something that Flint said, and he said, "You encourage somebody else in your practice," which brings it back to Sangha. So those are, and another thing that I do is shifting with, this Lock Kelly exercise, the exercises from him. Writing's very powerful for me. So, and then the calling, the exposing myself at those tender moments to another has really opened up a lot for me. So it's a big step for me.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think one of the aspects of that situation, one of the aspects of feeling like you've done everything there is to do and there's nothing left to do, you don't know what to do, is feeling isolated.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I think that's really wise, reaching out to someone that you feel safe with and sharing that, not like W.S. Merwin says, you're not planting that tree for the fruit. You're not expecting advice. You're not expecting an answer and to fix it, but just to share. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you very much. And I will say that I appreciated Joko Beck's statement that there's no perfection. There's no perfection anywhere, but there is more spaciousness. And I relate to that sentence, particularly in reference to encouraging someone else's practice. Because I often feel like, well, I don't have any answers. I don't have the best way to do things or how to fix this or what is the perfect Buddhist teaching that addresses this moment. But I like the reminder that I don't need that. I don't need perfection in order to connect. And the connection is what's important. It's not my cleverness, my knowledge, my giving something to someone else. It's creating a connection. Yeah. Marla, good morning.
Good morning, Anne. It's so wonderful to see you. It's been a while, and I appreciate so much that twinkle in your eye that I always recognize. And and it's there, it's still there. I I have taken so much from Flint's teaching of the week before the election when he talked about illuminating one corner of the world and focusing on our sphere of influence and making the people around us feel better because that radiates out and has, a progressive rippling effect. And so I'm continuing to focus on that. I mean, I started then thinking about, yeah, I have my corner of the world. And that has helped me to balance this tendency that I have to think globally and therefore be overwhelmed immediately. So I'm really working on that in my practice. And I'm finding myself really focusing on productivity. What is productive and what is unproductive? And when I talk to my friends and others who are stuck in a state of anger and hatred and delusionment and terror, some of them, is it productive for me to commiserate with them and encourage that stuckness by, you know, by sharing their feelings and whatever it is that increases that feeling that they have versus gently trying to redirect them. And that's a real big responsibility, and it can come off as a little bit not preachy so much as just I'm more enlightened than you are, so let's go somewhere else. And that's not what I'm going for. It's just like, let's talk about something more productive. Let's think about when we're going to fight so that we don't fall down and that we don't lose the battle because we have become full of hate. To do good and do what we've always done by being good to the people around us in our little illuminated corner. And when we fight, it's because we have to. And we remember we can't fight all the time.
Yeah.
I've been going over and over this in my head, and I have the capacity. I'm sure that I have the capacity to live that way. I'm sure of it, and I don't feel terrified or disillusioned or full of hate because it's unproductive. Thank you.
Thank you, Marla. Yeah. Joel.
And thank you for this wonderful talk. And for showing up the way you do. As Marla just noted, you have a special way of meeting the responsibilities that you take to the Sangha. And I appreciate that. I wanted to say that I was thinking of it when you were reading the part about constant practice, about, continuous practice, constant practice. The wonderful guidance that I've gotten over the last many months this year from the Soji and Samu meetings that we have on Friday, some of which you've been able to attend, many times you can't, I'm sure, because of work responsibilities. But with the idea, picking up on something that others had pointed to, and with guidance from Peg, to make your work your altar, to make everything that you do, by paying attention to it one step at a time, one moment at a time, the altar that is your life, So it transforms trivial things into awareness. That to me, that's really connected with what you're talking about, what to do when there's nothing to be done. It's like Merwin planting a tree. It's already the end of the world. He's just said, it's the last day of the world. Why would you plant a tree? It's not going to grow. It's not only not for the fruit, but its time is very limited. The same with our daily activities. But we can appreciate our life for the beauty and the joy that is in every moment, along with all the feelings that we are having that may not be so joyous or beautiful. And and hold those two things as true at the same time. I just struck by that. And I want to say, I'm looking at the Zendo right now. There's one guy there, and I believe I'm the only guy online. I'm so grateful to the women of Apamata.
And I'm very grateful to the men of Appamata as well. And before we end, I wanted to read Place again. On the last day of the world, I would want to plant a tree. What for? Not for the fruit. The tree that bears the fruit is not the one that was planted. I want the tree that stands in the earth for the first time, with the sun already going down, and the water touching its roots in the earth full of the dead, and the clouds passing one by one over its leaves. Thank you for your kind attention.